We gotta find out if that La Kodesh or whatever, if that's Hebrew, or that's a make-believe language. Because if that's a make-believe language, vocab and faithful putting in work, and you can't talk about the complexion of his skin. If it's work, they putting in work. We got to figure this out.
Greetings. Just today, I heard that Kelly Richardson is apparently planning on releasing a series of videos which will attempt to refute or expose certain Christian apologists who deal with Israelite issues, and that he's even putting debate challenges on his Facebook page, and even hinting that he plans on doing a video on Lashawan Kodash, which is a subject of interest to me. I myself have made a few videos on Lashawan Kodash, some of which have been hosted on the YouTube accounts of Vocab Malone and Faithful to God. And so, being interested in the subject, I took a peek at Kelly Richardson's Facebook page and saw this post here, which you see on your screen. So in this video, I'm going to briefly discuss this post that you see on your screen, this Facebook post. But I would also say I look forward to any video that Kelly Richardson will be releasing on the subject in the near future. However, before I get into the content of this post, I want to touch on something really quickly. It's my understanding that he's going to argue that the various Christian apologists, or quote-unquote urban apologists, refuse to dialogue with him. Now, maybe I'm mistaken about that, but just in case that understanding is correct, I'd like to clarify something very quickly. And that is that I myself tried to initiate a cordial and respectful correspondence with Pastor Kelly Richardson. Last fall, there was briefly some discussion about the possibility of having a dialogue with Pastor Richardson, whether via video chat or even over the telephone. At the time, it was my understanding that would be organized by Sister E and Faithful to God. However, apparently there was some sort of breakdown in communication or miscommunication, some sort of misunderstanding, and Pastor Richardson and Sister E came away with some sort of impression that we were unwilling to dialogue with him. So last March, I posted to Sister E's forum offering that perhaps instead we could have a correspondence on our various points of disagreement in her Facebook forum. I felt that her forum would provide a good neutral venue for that sort of a correspondence, and I also offered to her that a correspondence could be helpful because then we wouldn't have to engage in the messy work or the sticky work of trying to reconcile our various busy schedules. You know, one person could post their thoughts in her forum, and then when time permitted, the other person or other participants could post their thoughts, their responses, etc. Therefore, we didn't have to be on at the same time. And so I told her that I would attempt to initiate these correspondences by posting certain threads in her forum, and then, when time permitted, the correspondence could build from there. And she responded, "Thanks, no problem," which I interpreted to mean that she agreed that perhaps a correspondence would be a good idea and that it would be permissible for me to share my thoughts in her forum, and then, when time permitted, perhaps Kelly Richardson or other gentlemen or ladies who were on his side could then respond, and the correspondence could build from there. It seemed to me that she agreed with what I had proposed. And so I composed a post which covered the basics of where Lashawan Kodash and modern Israeli Hebrew stand vis-a-vis biblical Hebrew. I went into some of the criticisms that are put forth towards modern Israeli Hebrew and talked about how some of those same criticisms could apply to Lashawan Kodash, and I discussed the evidence for and against Lashawan Kodash. I handled it very respectfully, and I was looking forward to the comments of others without any intention of rushing anyone. The post was up for a few days, and it didn't receive any replies, and that's fine. My attitude was that there's no time limit for responses. People should respond when their time permits. Sister E allowed that post to stay up in her forum for several days, and one thing that was helpful, in her forum, you're able to see who has viewed your post if you post to her forum. And so each day I was checking to see if Pastor Kelly Richardson had seen it yet, because I was looking most forward to his thoughts on what I had written. Then, after a few days, I saw that he had viewed the post. However, unfortunately, within hours of Pastor Richardson seeing the post, it was deleted, and I was abruptly kicked out of the forum. Now, ultimately, it's okay. It's not a big deal. However, if I'm honest, I must confess that a part of me does wonder if Pastor Richardson may have played some role in Sister E's decision to delete my post and eject me from the forum. If not, I apologize for speculating in such a way. But beyond that, I just wanted to make clear that I was interested in dialogue, and I did sincerely attempt to establish a correspondence. And perhaps there's still an opportunity to discuss this with Pastor Richardson, and I certainly want to make clear that I remain interested in discussing this with him, irrespective of the medium via which we discuss it. It could be a correspondence, it could be a telephone call, or it could just be with different videos. Nonetheless, let me now get back to this Facebook post, which Pastor Richardson wrote back on April 24th. The post begins, quote, so if the Hebrew's language during the time when Christ walked the earth was Aramaic, then according to one of many references, they would have said Allah versus Eli. The full teaching will be uploaded very soon. And then he proceeded to quote Matthew 27:46, after which he followed with this note, quote, ancient Hebrew was a very simple and unambiguous language. It did not have the vowels we have come to learn. Initially, it had just the vowel ah associated with each consonant. Nevertheless, the proper translation of Eli Eli lama sabachthani is Allah lama sabachthana, or Alaya lama aizabathanaya. End quote. And then he followed that with the humorous hashtags dunking urban apologists, Zephaniah 3:9, pure language. And then he closed the post by appending an image which, among other things, compared the Aramaic Allah to the Arabic Allah. I found the Arabic analogy somewhat interesting because Arabic, like Aramaic, has different terms to refer to, on the one hand, a general word for deity, and then on the other hand, the God, what would be considered by Christians and Jews and Muslims the one true God. So, for example, in Arabic, in Islam, Muslims have their famous Shahada, the first part of which states La ilaha illallah. The word ilah refers to a deity in general. There is no God, there are no gods. And then the word at the end, Allah, refers to the God, the one true God. Now, you'll find the word Allah all over Arabic translations of the Bible. However, you won't find it in an Arabic translation of the opening verse of the 22nd Psalm, where instead you'll find Ilahi, Ilahi, limada taraktani. Note that that word Ilahi is just the aforementioned word ilah, with the possessive suffix at the end. The word ilah, or with the possessive suffix ilahi, is different from Allah. Regarding the verb taraktani, we'll touch on that in a bit later on in this video. But for now, I'd like to return to how Pastor Kelly Richardson rendered the cry on the cross. Recall that he rendered the cry on the cross, Allah lama sabachthana. By the way, that second rendering in his post, which read Alaya lama aizabathanaya, is merely his Lashawan Kodash pronunciation of how the text is rendered in the 22nd Psalm. The mainstream pronunciation would be Eli Eli lama azabtani. But I'd like to focus on that first line, which is his rendering of the cry on the cross. First, I'd like to focus on that word Allah. What he did is he read somewhere about a particular Aramaic dialect's term for the God, the one true God, God with the definite article at the end, and he inserted it into a sentence which was clearly using a more generic word for deity with a possessive suffix at the end. So here's the word which he had read about in whichever source he had consulted. It's the word for the God, and that's literally what it means, the God, insofar that it's the generic word for deity with the definite article. By the way, in Aramaic, the definite article takes the form of an aleph at the end of the word. But here's an important detail. Aramaic has different dialects, and the relevant term, like other terms, is pronounced differently from one dialect to another. So, for example, in Jewish Aramaic, the word is pronounced Elaha. Meanwhile, in Eastern Syriac, Eastern Syrian Aramaic, it's pronounced Alaha, and in Western Syriac, it's pronounced Aloho. Now, with all due respect to Pastor Kelly Richardson, I feel that not only is it problematic that he didn't note that there's these different dialects and different pronunciations, but so too, I think his approach puts the cart before the horse when it simply tries to pick the pronunciation which is most convenient to his position and then insert that in place of the ancient transliterations which we have. Honestly, I feel that puts the cart before the horse. The approach should go in the opposite direction when trying to determine which pronunciations were employed in the time of Christ or by Christ himself. We should defer to the ancient transliterations or draw insight from those ancient transliterations. I'll return to that point in a moment, but for now, permit me to repeat that this is, irrespective of the precise pronunciation, what you see on your screen is the term for the God, which is the term you would use for the one true God. It's essentially Aramaic's equivalent to Allah, to the Arabic Allah. Aramaic's more general word for deity is spelled essentially the same, however, it's without the definite article at the end, without that terminal aleph at the end. And this word is pronounced Elah in Jewish Aramaic, Allah in Eastern Syriac, and Alo in later Western Syriac. And all these terms are equivalent to the Arabic word Ilah, which is, again, the general word for deity. All these terms are spelled the same. It's Aleph Lamed He, or in Arabic, Alif Lam Ha. A common way to say my God would be that general word for deity with the first person singular possessive suffix appended to the end in the form of a yod. So, it's Elahi in Jewish Aramaic, Alahi or Alohi in various forms of Syriac, and Ilahi, as was already covered, in Arabic. By the way, on an interesting historical and cinematic note, the Aramaist who helped with the dialogue on Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ didn't go with either the Matthean or the Markan reading, and instead went with that standard Jewish Aramaic reading, Elahi. Meanwhile, Jewish Aramaic, which often overlaps with Hebrew, also has the term Eli. And you can see that, for example, in Targum Yonatan's translation of Psalm 22. So this is the standard Jewish Aramaic translation of the 22nd Psalm. And in that translation, Eli appears. Now, we can have disagreements as to how that's pronounced, but in this video, following the lead of Pastor Kelly Richardson, we're asking the question of how it would have been pronounced in Jesus' time, whether it's Hebrew or Aramaic. And my answer would be, well, what appears in our oldest transliteration of such? And what we find in our oldest transliteration is a transliteration that implies a pronunciation or vocalization along the lines of Eli. And I would say that Pastor Kelly Richardson, with all due respect to him, still needs to explain why our ancient transliterations render it that way, why they clearly recognize vocalizations that are not recognized in the system that he proposes, which is essentially La Shuban Kodash. So, getting back to Pastor Kelly Richardson's rendering of the cry on the cross, I would say that my first objection is that he totally dropped the first-person possessive suffix. And second, that his rendering is not supported by our earliest transliterations. He's attempting to contradict those earliest transliterations, but I would argue that we should refer to the earlier sources, defer to the earlier sources, rather than mere modern speculation in a vacuum, which doesn't take into account the spectrum of dialects that have existed within Aramaic history. Another objection that I have is that he dropped half of the pronomial suffix that appeared at the end of the verb, shabaktani, or sabaktani is per the Greek transliteration. And that's also an issue. I would wonder what's the justification for him simply throwing away the yod there, the ya, however he wants to pronounce it, ya or e. So let's take a look at this within a more broad Semitic spectrum. Recall that the verb is you abandoned me, or you forsook me, etc. The question was, why did you forsake me? Why did you abandon me? So on your screen, you see on the top line the biblical Hebrew verb that appears in Psalm 22, azabtani. Then you find the standard Aramaic translation of that, whether it's in Targum Yonatan or the Pshita for the 22nd Psalm, and that's shabaktani. And then finally you find at the bottom the standard Arabic translation of that, taraktani. I'll use a bit of color coding to explain the structure of these verb constructions. In each case, the first three letters are the root of the verb. If that had appeared standing alone, it would have been third-person singular perfect tense, or quote-unquote past tense for some. However, the verb was not rendered in the third person, rather was rendered in the second person, and that's what that tau or ta after the root signifies. It's azabta, shabakta, tarakta, you did this, you abandoned me. And the last two letters are part of the first-person singular pronominal suffix, who the verb is applied to, performed on, and that's ni, me, I. So azab or shabak or tarak by itself would have been he abandoned, but it's in the second person, shabakta, azabta, tarakta, you abandoned, and then azabtani, shabaktani, taraktani, you abandoned me. And regarding how that pronominal suffix is pronounced, notice we have agreement between the pointing in the Masoretic text, recourse to Arabic, or our oldest extant transliterations which are found in the New Testament. I think that's pretty clear. On that note, I look forward to any responses that Pastor Kelly Richardson might have, and I look forward to the comments of others. God bless.